In James chapter 1, we read kind of an interesting passage. James says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." Well, why? Well, he goes on to say, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So the question is, why does God allow trials if God is good? And even beyond that, where does suffering even come from? Well, James, the brother of Jesus, explores that there's kind of two reasons or sources of our suffering. The first is what he calls trials. These are those external battles that we have to face in life. It's when someone outside of us exercises their free will inappropriately. It really is just the result of a fallen and broken world. And so sometimes we have to face the reality that our world is not the way it's supposed to be. But in verse 13, he says there's another source, and it's temptation. And that's the internal battle. That's when you or I exercise our free will inappropriately. Here's the reality. There are consequences as a result of our own choices. And so sometimes suffering comes because of a broken world, and sometimes suffering comes because we make bad choices. So then James says, well, but I want you to consider it pure joy. This is an imperative. It's a demand, a command, but it's also a choice. See, the problem is when we face trials or temptations, we often let our feelings rule the day. But James is saying, no, you're not a victim. In your trials and in your temptations, you can actually stop and think about what God is doing. What is he doing for something better? Sometimes he's doing something for my good. Sometimes it's so I can have an incredible testimony of his work in my life. Sometimes it's so I can learn something. And sometimes it's so I can be an advocate for justice. So he says, persevere. Just like the image of a soldier under a heavy pack, he's saying suffering actually is doing something. It's moving you somewhere. So what is it doing? Well, it's revealing our character. You want to get to know somebody? Just watch them in a stressful situation or a crisis. It will quickly be revealed. It teaches us what it means to trust God and actually learn what we can do or what God is capable to do in us in our trial. It strengthens our character. And if you do these things, if you persevere in suffering, here's the promise. It's found in verse 12. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. So God is doing something in your life, even in your trials and in your temptations. Ask the question, God, what are you doing? And then trust him to work it out for your good. And that is a stepping stone toward God, who God has called you to be.